Executions in Japan are shrouded in secrecy, with prisoners typically given only a few hours' notice, but some may be given no warning at all. Their families, lawyers, and the public are usually notified about the execution only after it has taken place. Secret executions are in contravention of international standards on the use of the death penalty. This and the lack of other adequate legal safeguards for those facing the death penalty in Japan has been widely criticized by UN experts. This includes defendants being denied adequate legal counsel and a lack of a mandatory appeal process for capital cases. Several prisoners with mental and intellectual disabilities are also known to have been executed or remain on death row. Amnesty International opposes the death penalty in all cases without exception, regardless of the nature or circumstances of the crime, the guilt, innocence, or other characteristics of the offender or the method used by the state to carry out the execution. The death penalty violates the right to life and is the ultimate cruel, inhuman, and degrading punishment. Japan is among a small, shrinking minority of countries around the world that continue to execute people. As of today, 102 countries, more than half of the world's countries, have fully abolished the death penalty, and 140 countries globally have abolished the death penalty in law or practice. The Japanese government maintains that the continued use of executions is supported by public opinion and acts as a deterrent for serious crimes. The Japanese authorities' willingness to continue with executions means the country is out of step with the majority of the world, as more and more countries abandon this punishment. There is no evidence that the death penalty is any more of a deterrent to violent crime than imprisonment. Amnesty International has called on Japan to immediately introduce a moratorium on executions, as a first step towards abolition of the death penalty. Human rights campaigners have condemned Japan's use of the death penalty after 2 inmates were hanged, bringing the number of executions to 16 since the Prime Minister, Shinzo Abe, took office in late 2012. On March 25, 2016, 2 people were executed. They were Yasutoshi Kamata, a 75-year-old man, and Junko Yoshida, a 56-year-old woman. The executions are the first to be carried out in Japan in 2016, and takes the total number of executions under Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's current government to 16. Yasutoshi Kamata's death sentence for murder charges was confirmed in 2005, and he was 75 years old when he was executed. In response to a questionnaire sent to him by a human rights group in 2015, he stated that he had become senile and did not understand anything complicated. Kamata was born in 1940 and he lived in Osaka's Nishinari ward at the time of the first murders. Kamata's first murder took place in May 1985 when he allegedly strangled a housewife, Fusizuma, 46, in Osaka's Nishinari ward. According to prosecutors, Kamata murdered the homemaker of Jodo Ward, Osaka, after quarreling with her. In June the same year, he allegedly killed 19-year-old Midori Chunin, who had disappeared 2 months earlier while on her way to work at a home for the mentally handicapped in Chandabayashi, Osaka Prefecture. Kamata allegedly strangled this one in the same ward. In January 1987, Kamata allegedly murdered Kamiko Tsujikado, a third-year primary school student of Sumiyoshi Ward, Osaka, after luring her to his apartment. He then allegedly pretended the girl was still alive and telephoned her school to demand a 30 million yen ransom. It's here that the murder stopped for a while. You see, poor Kamata was caught thieving and imprisoned on 2 separate occasions. But as the saying goes, you can't keep a good man down. In July 1993, about 4 months after finishing the second sentence, he allegedly strangled Kazusuda, 45, a bar employee of Nishinari Ward, Osaka. In March the following year, he allegedly strangled 37-year-old Kimiko Nakano, a waitress of Cheo Ward, Osaka. Prosecutors claimed Kamata murdered the women because he was pissed off by their requests for a loan. In an attempt to keep the bodies from discovery, Kamata chopped up the remains of Wada and Nakano, and disposed of them in the mountains. But he got unlucky. He was caught not long afterwards. Kamata allegedly confessed to all the 5 murders during investigation, but later denied any knowledge of the crimes and pleaded not guilty during the first hearing in March 1996. The court admitted the testimony of a voice identification expert, who said the voice of the person who made the ransom demand by telephone to Tsujikado's school was different from that of the suspect. But this wasn't enough for his release. Oddly, the Osaka District Public Prosecutor's Office took the rare step of treating 3 of the murders separately from the remaining 2, and demanded the death penalty for both sets of murders. The prosecution said the string of murders which Kamata is accused of merits the unusual demand because his was a brutal and atrocious case rarely seen in the annals of crime in our country. The prosecution told presiding Judge Nobuyuki Yokota that Kamata has a strong antisocial tendency and that there is no room for correction, adding the families of the victims sought the most extreme penalty. The execution of Mr. Kamata is particularly problematic, considering the UN Human Rights Committee's recommended in 2008 that Japan adopt a more humane approach with regard to the treatment of death row inmates and the execution of persons at an advanced stage or with mental disabilities. Since the UN handed down this recommendation, Japan has executed several elderly and mentally disabled individuals. The second person executed was Junko Yoshida. Junko Yoshida, sentenced to death in 2010 for murder, had her request for a retrial rejected last year. It is suspected that the Ministry of Justice expedited her execution and so that she could not file another petition for retrial. Following Junko Yoshida and Yasutoshi Kamata's executions, there remain a lot of people sentenced to death in Japan. Junko Yoshida, 46, was found guilty by the Fukuoka District Court in September 2004 of being the mastermind behind the killings in 1998 and 1999. At the appellate court, she argued that she didn't have absolute control over her accomplices and asked that the sentence be commuted to life imprisonment. Presiding Judge Hiroshi Hamasaki ruled that Yoshida played a far greater role than the accomplices. Yoshida clearly manipulated her accomplices with clever lies and therefore, the court must mete out capital punishment, Hamasaki said. The High Court also upheld the sentence for nurse Hitomi Ishii, 47, who received 17 years in prison. A ruling on clinical research coordinator Miyuki Tsutsumi, 46, who got life imprisonment. Ishii and Tsutsumi confessed to the killings but said Yoshida drew them into the plot. The remaining defendant, Kazuko Ikigami, 43, also a nurse, died of cancer September 1, 2015 before her ruling was handed down. According to the High Court, Yoshida, Tsutsumi and Ikigami killed Ikigami's 39-year-old husband in Kurim in January 1998 by injecting air into his bloodstream. In March 1999, the 4 women killed Ishii's 44-year-old husband in Okawa by injecting a large amount of liquor into his stomach through a medical tube. The defendants received 67 million yen in insurance money for the deaths. They were arrested in April 2002, after Ishii, who was allegedly threatened by Yoshida and the others, confessed to the Fukuoka Prefectural Police about her husband's murder. The hangings also highlighted the long periods, on average more than 5 years, between 2005 and 2014, that inmates are forced to wait to be executed. Kamata's sentence was finalized 11 years before the execution, and Yoshida's almost 6 years before the executions. Death row inmates are typically given only a few hours' notice of their execution, with relatives and lawyers informed only after it has been carried out. Damning 2009 report, Amnesty claimed Japan's death row inmates were being driven insane and exposed to cruel, inhuman and degrading treatment. Campaigners accused Japan of resisting the global trend towards the abolition of the death penalty in the mistaken belief that the punishment acts as a deterrent. Despite the fact that about 140 countries in the world have already abandoned or have stopped executions for more than a decade, the Japanese government is turning its back on the trend. Opinion polls in Japan show high levels of public support for the death penalty, although campaigners say the surveys are worded in such a way as to play on the public's fear of crime. In a 2010 poll, 86% of respondents said the use of the death penalty was unavoidable, a sentiment that strengthened after a doomsday cult carried out a sarin gas attack on the Tokyo subway in 1995, killing 13 people and injuring thousands more. Thank you for watching Death Row.